Prior to 9/11, we had been already preparing ourselves for a possible act of terrorism within LA County. We knew it was just a matter of time when something of the magnitude of Oklahoma City or what happened at the World Trade Center in '93 would be repeated, and maybe it would be something that would be closer to home. There's a few threats even prior to 9/11, to be honest with you, that we became aware of in the greater LA County area. Such a target that was a target before 9/11 and has been after 9/11, such a target does exist here in the city, in the community.
So there was a credible threat to a location before and after 9/11 in Santa Clarita?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Robert Murphy was driving to work at the city of Santa Clarita, where today he is the city's transportation manager. He turned on his car radio, as usual, and heard something that sounded ludicrous. An airplane, the commentator said, had crashed into the World Trade Center. Bob looked down at his radio to see if somebody had changed it to a comedy station, but it was his regular news station. And then there was the voice of President George W. Bush saying a tragedy had befallen the nation. Bob Murphy turned around and drove home and, like so many Americans that day, turned on the television. His immediate concern was for two of his brothers, one a policeman, the other a firefighter in New York City, where Bob had grown up. He got in touch with his family and learned that his policeman brother was safe, but there had been no word from his kid brother, Ray, the firefighter. Raymond E. Murphy, 46, was the lieutenant on Ladder 16, New York Fire Department. Ray had gone in on a rescue mission after the collapse of the first tower. Another firefighter snapped his picture with a disposable camera just moments before Tower 2 collapsed on top of Ray. A few days later, they found Ray Murphy's helmet.
It's a disaster for us if we lose one person. You're talking 343 people. That's a catastrophe. That would be like eliminating all of Santa Clarita firemen, all three shifts, plus part of Antelope Valley at one time, all of a sudden gone.
We were fortunate to go back to the Bronx and find Fire Station 73 back there, so we went back and took some shirts and hats and got to sit around the firehouse, the fire table, and try to talk humorously and joke around and try to get them not so much thinking of not what happened, but try to get them in a different frame of mind of saying, hey, we're here to help you guys, and we're part of your family, and how can we help you out?
What it came down to was the biggest thing that we could help them with was in honor of their families of the fallen, because they have a lot of tradition in that fire department, and when one fireman dies, it's very typical that between 7,000 and 10,000 firemen show up in uniform for that one service. And here they've got 343 services to go to, sometimes up to 20 a day. And they were finding that some memorials had maybe 100 people. Our group that went was organized within our battalion. On our shift, we put the guys together. We got a list of how many people we could get together and who wanted to go. But we went on our own time, our own money. We had to make all of our own arrangements. We did have permission to go in uniform, so we could go to the services in uniform. But everything else was done by put together, all the plans, the flights, everything was put together by us in the field with the support of the chief, but it was all off duty.
I think the thing that was sort of neat, we brought back here to California, the stations back there have a patch and a name for their station and a little insignia and a certain little, saying they made up for the station. We brought one back here, and we got the squirrel cage here because there's so much stuff going on here at 73. It's called the hub, and just with phone calls and engines and personnel in and out. So here in our battalion, the area that we work, a lot of stations are getting their own little patch, getting it sewed on our turnout coats, and we're sort of bringing something that they've done and they've implemented in New York, we brought back here to California.
It was the highlight of my career. I think that if I hadn't have gone, I think I would have felt there was a very, very big void, that I felt like I needed to go back and do something to see this, to see if I could help out, do something for the families. And without question, this has been the most important time of my whole career, the most important event that I was ever involved in.
The thing that really made me think really hard and long was I had become to the point where I didn't appreciate what I had. other words, I've got the best job in the world. I get to do,
or me.
I get to do the greatest stuff. I get to drive the back of a fire truck and do all kinds of stuff to help people, but I kind of had taken it for granted a little bit myself, that I was in a profession that had such a strong sense of family and a strong sense of service and contributing to the community at large, that it made me start to appreciate what I had a lot more. You know, I'm glad I'm a fireman. I enjoyed what I do. I'm glad I can be a part of the fire service community, and I'm proud to be a fireman.
We were supposed to have a council meeting, a very long council meeting that night, and people were very upset. As all people were somewhat dismayed and shocked, and we were all reorienting to who we knew and what we didn't know and what we could do and how we could help each other. And I immediately requested that the council meeting be continued to another night, allowing us to think our position through. And a lot of our staff wanted to be just talking to their relatives in other parts of the country. Some people weren't sure if they had relatives in the building. People wanted to hug their children. They wanted to just know their families and friends were okay.
What really made, well, for me, and I'm sure for most of us here, which made 9/11 even more devastating emotionally, was the fact that Jake Karigian had just been killed in a shootout just a few days before. We had just gone through this burial ceremony. We were just getting back to work, and now here we have this tragic incident that impacts the entire United States and devastates the New York Police Department and New York Fire Department. We actually brought a number of families back who were involved in the recovery efforts in New York. They were part of their emergency services detail, and they had spent many months going through the debris and recovering their bodies and recovering members of their department and fire department. So in order to do something for them, we got together and brought the families back here for a vacation. You know, we got some wonderful support from the city, from the community, from the Hyatt. I gave them rooms. I think we brought about 46 people back. We had the block party, or the night with the jazz band. We had a golf tournament to raise funds for them. And what was really amazing is they didn't realize that we were going to do this for them. They thought they were coming out here on vacation and expected to pay for it. They didn't know till they got here that we had raised funds to pay for their flight, to pay for their rooms, to pay for their week on vacation with their family. So it was something that we could give back to them for their hard work. We also raised money for families from the fire department and the New York Police Department who lost loved ones that day. And we identified some families, and then we purposely raised money for those families, and deputies went back to New York and gave them checks for the money we'd raised. We also had the bumper stickers where we raised money for that. So we just wanted to let them know that we understood how they felt. We understand how the family feels. We understand how their department feels, because we had just gone through the loss of Jake, and we just wanted to be there to say, hey, look, we understand, and we're here for you. If you need anything, just let us know.
I think the hardest thing a year ago was how to deal with children, with teenagers, with this issue, because adults didn't know how to handle it. I mean, adults were becoming both psychologically and physically ill and just put off by it. And so now we had this daunting task of how are we going to deal with it. At the high school level, I mean, we have an excellent principal at Valencia High, Dr. Priest, where he wanted to address it as a school. And so every class or social studies took on the discussion of what the act was. What was the background? And for a lot of people, they had to understand the whole concept of why would people even hate the United States enough to do this. And so it gave you that outlet to talk about relations in the Middle East and Israel and Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq. So it opened up that historical, part of it. So I could talk to a 16, 17, 18-year-old and actually work through how we got to that point and now what's going to happen politically and socially. The hardest part was the elementary kid. My son Nick is 9 years old. My son Jake was 6 years old. And each elementary school dealt with it differently. Some addressed it. Others made it very clear it's a parent decision. The parents need to talk about it. My kids were visibly disturbed by what they saw. Okay, I guess because I'm a teacher, I don't hide it from my kids, or I didn't shelter them from it. I wanted them to know what happened. I wanted them to know why, and I wanted to help them, you know, to sort of walk themselves through it and talk themselves through it, where we're going to happen.
We're part of a statewide planning process called SIMS, Standard Emergency Management System. So when any disaster happens, we know how to pull out the book or know how to respond. And our response for such a thing as what happened on September 11th would be first to check on our staff to make sure the staff are okay, to contact the operational area, which is the county. LA County is the operational area for where we are. And we would find out what the threat was. We'd do a threat analysis, and from that point on, that would determine what our next action would be.
Basically, within our organization, we have an emergency services bureau and a command center in downtown Los Angeles, and they activated a command team, and they began disseminating information to all the stations, and part of that was to place everybody on a tactical alert, to get our equipment together, get our response team, get our rosters ready, be ready to move at a moment's notice anywhere in Los Angeles County. So that came out right away, as we expected it would. The other thing that we did is we have critical facilities identified within our policing jurisdiction, and we began checking those to make sure that we knew where they were, we knew exactly what was housed there, whether it was chemicals that could create problems for us, or whether it was businesses that are associated with national defense or anything like that. So we began making sure that we had all of that information. It was all up to date. The patrol deputies all had that. They knew their job in going out every shift, every day, and doing a check of those facilities to make sure that it looked, at least from our perspective, to be normal. The other thing is, you know, we have the California aqueduct that runs through our area. Water was always a concern, and contamination of water, so we also had to check those types of facilities too.
This plant processes 30 million gallons of water every day. This is water from the California aqueduct, the state water project that comes to us from Northern California, and we render it safe for human consumption. On the morning of September 11th, not knowing what else was going on, we closed the gates and denied public access until we had a better picture of what was developing. We've instituted a guard on site on a continuing basis during business hours, and the purpose of the guard is to make sure that people that are on their way up here are here for legitimate business. There were a number of other measures that we took to make doubly sure that the facilities were completely secure from any kind of a terrorist incident. I can't tell you about any of the specifics of any of the measures that we undertook, other than the one that everybody saw, which was our lockdown. But that's just part of our mission, to make sure that the water supply is safe and reliable to the community. The primary threat, as we see it in the water systems, is not necessarily an attack on water quality, but attack on water infrastructure, water facilities. The fact that we process so much water makes it virtually impossible for a terrorist to poison the water supply. They'd have to bring in truckloads of any kind of a chemical in order to render the water supply undrinkable or unsafe. Facilities-wise, the terrorist type of threat is no different than the threat that we would see from an earthquake or a natural disaster or other types of events. Our facilities have been built, as have water facilities for water agencies throughout the United States, with 100% reliability in mind, and we have lots of redundant systems, lots of duplicated systems, so that when things fail, we have backups.
There are many facilities, many locations within Santa Clarita that are vulnerable to an act of terrorism. You would have to look at locations that draw a large number of people for any specific reason or purpose, be it for shopping, being for entertainment, and so on. And I don't want to be specific and name locations because I don't want to give the indication that they're a target. But any location that has the natural flow of bringing people to its location for the purpose of conducting business or a location of worship, of assemblage, education, government facilities, again, entertainment, locations where people go to, again, spend money, and there's a large number of people at that specific location at any given time is a target.
Magic Mountain, where the young adults made that kind of off-the-cuff statement about that they left a bomb in their locker when they were at Hurricane Harbor, and that resulted in us shutting down Magic Mountain, evacuating it, getting our bomb technicians out, going in, and then determining that it was not true. They just made the statement because they were not happy. So although we would take those threats serious anyways, I think it was just with the heightened sensitivity and because of 9/11, it just, everybody was a little bit on edge over those. So that was a local one that, although it turned out to be nothing there other than a hoax, we still did everything that we would have done had they actually placed a bomb inside the locker.
Another local incident prompted a nationwide FBI alert when a customer at the Walmart store in the Valencia marketplace purchased a combination of items consistent with the manufacture of a homemade bomb. The post-9/11 anthrax scare reached the Santa Clarita Valley in November, and the mail processing facility in Valencia Commerce Center was among a relatively small percentage of postal facilities throughout the nation to be tested. No spores were found. The economic impacts of 9/11 varied. Overall, Santa Clarita didn't suffer tremendously from the massive airline and travel industry layoffs that pushed the nation's October unemployment rate to its highest point in 2 decades. But the phony September 15 bomb threat at Hurricane Harbor was perhaps the least of the troubles for Six Flags. Attendance fell off at Magic Mountain, as it did at amusement parks everywhere, and company-wide, Six Flags posted losses. Valencia-based Princess Cruises estimated it lost $3 million to $5 million in just the week after 9/11, and revenues were impacted when the company redeployed ships to steer clear of Middle Eastern waters. Local hotels fared rather well, thanks in large part to business clientele, and there was plenty of new business for computer security system designers. And then there was Delta Scientific Corporation in the Valencia Industrial Center. It's the leading manufacturer of counter-terrorist barricade systems. The phone rang off the hook immediately after 9/11, and the company had to add shifts to keep up with the demand from the State Department and others for its bollards and barricades, which are capable of stopping 15,000-pound trucks loaded with explosives. Delta barricades protect 160 embassies and consulates in 130 countries, and when the new war on terrorism moved from diplomatic circles to the battlefield, Delta rolled out portable systems that could be deployed quickly on the ground to guard temporary military installations. A Delta system would eventually protect the U.S. Embassy in the Afghan capital of Kabul. The new war also brought contract renewals for HR Textron, the Valencia maker of guidance and motion control systems. HR won contracts to provide components for the Navy's F-18 Super Hornet aircraft and for the Army's M1 Abrams tank. But Santa Clarita and surrounding communities paid a dear price for their participation in Operation Enduring Freedom. In early December, 28-year-old Staff Sergeant Brian Cody Prosser of nearby Fraser Park was one of 3 Army Green Berets killed when an American B-25 missed its target and dropped a 2,000-pound bomb too close to their location outside Kandahar. Closer to home, 18-year-old Robert Wilson of Saugus was a new Army recruit on September 11th. 11 months later, he died in a motorcycle accident in North Carolina, where he was stationed at Fort Bragg, awaiting orders to ship out.
I think with the fall of the towers came kind of the fall of our naive security. All of a sudden in that visual, we saw some of the things we believed in not to be so strong. We were more vulnerable than we thought. So I think the first reactions that I and others were dealing with is just that feeling of fear mixed with insecurity and what was going to happen next. It was an amazing thing of what a small world this is, that somebody had a relative on that plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Somebody had a relative who worked in the trade tower. Somebody had a good friend who was in New York who witnessed it. So those kind of connections were just really valid and helpful, I think, to help us know we're not so far apart from each other. Now, the challenge to us, to me, is to take patriotism and what do we do with it? Is it my country right or wrong? Or is it because I believe God's at work through the United States, what are we called to do? What are the challenges we have to not wave the flag, but wave who we are and do those things that only a country that is blessed as ours, I think, can do. I was saddened to hear of some of the events, not only in our own community, but I think there was a man shot in Arizona, as well as across the country, cabbies being pulled from their vehicles because they looked Mideastern. Those are just the terrible underside of who we are. And I think our call is to keep reminding ourselves that we can slip easily into that, but vengeance is mine, says the Lord, and we are to be those who love, to forgive our enemy, and to do those, again, action steps, again, providing food, providing shelter, providing clothing, providing anything we can do to keep reaching out and helping. It also, I think, caused us as a nation, as well as maybe a community here, to all of a sudden be so aware of Islam, of this divergent culture that we are now living amongst and in, and I think began to teach us, one, an awareness, and secondly, how we are to have tolerance, and that we should learn about one another and respect one another. So those begin to be actions that we could take of learning about who we are in our differences.
حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
I have lived here now for 15 years, and there were like 4 families that I knew who lived here, but now I believe, if my estimate is correct, there are about 300 families, Muslim families here, and a lot of young families have come over in this area. We have had good responsive, positive responsive. People have come up and shown us sympathy rather than empathy or, or anger. We haven't had any incidents of anger, slurs, or any racial slurs, thrown at us. On the other hand, people have really sympathized, and they said, we know you, you are good neighbors, and we are sure that you have nothing to do with this. And this was partly because of terrorism, and you are not part of that at all. So we have been fortunate. We live in a community which is quite affluent, and everybody is understanding this. Shows that the community is more highly placed or qualified, and there are more educated and better people living here. And I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the community. They've all lived here very happily. I know most of them because we have been meeting here every week. And it has brought us closer together because we have discussed this and we have talked about it, and nobody has complained about having any repercussions at all. The media has influenced everybody that any act of terrorism is linked to Islam. Automatically, the thought goes that way, and everybody starts thinking, oh yeah, this is a Muslim now. This is Islamic. And that happened to me, and fortunately, I was not in that situation that I would hear any repercussions. In fact, on the contrary, a lot of my American friends called me and asked me about my welfare and said if I had any problems, I can count on their support. So I believe a person should be taken as an individual more than as a fanatic or as a terrorist. I mean, we are sitting here together talking to each other. You don't think I'm a terrorist by any chance. I'm a human being like you, and we treat each other like human beings. And I think that's a very important factor, because if you consider your neighbor as a terrorist, life would become very difficult. And I have found that in Santa Clarita, since this happened, the community has grown together, closer, and they have related to each other before everybody kept to himself. This is basically a bedroom community. Everybody works somewhere else. You come sleep and you don't know who your neighbors are. But since that time, I know my neighbors look at me, I look at them, I have attended few meetings, and we have related more to each other and understood each other much better. And that's a good relationship. We should try and meet more often and get together so that all misunderstandings go away from our midst, and we can live as a community happily.
It used to be that we would plan mostly for natural disasters. Now, of course, in the last few years, we've added to that planning list man-made disasters, such as terrorist attacks or biological weapons, etc., etc. So we have, say, for 2 years, really closely looked at how we would need to respond differently to a terrorist attack. Because a terrorist attack is usually a small, confined area. It usually relies heavily on the law enforcement, and then bringing in the appropriate specialists to take care of it. It can be a crime scene. It's not something that would normally impact our whole community, which is why we always drill for earthquakes, because that is the ultimate, as we all know.
We've augmented our response to a possible hazmat, maybe terrorist event. We've added additional resources. We've also put together what's called a innumerable, which is a vehicle that has specialized equipment on it. We've also placed T-kits on all our first responding units. These T-kits basically have an auto-injector that contains 2 milligrams of atropine sulfate, and the second one is 2-PAM chloride, 800 milligrams. They work together to basically contract and to help someone that's been exposed to a nerve agent.
We train for terrorist attacks. We train on incidents with weapons of mass destruction and so forth. And I think a lot of times we'll end up going maybe through the motions. We train it, we think we know it, but it's kind of like we don't think it's really going to happen to us. Now we know all bets are off. We look at everything now and we wonder, well, could this have a secondary device? Is this an unusual incident? Do we have to take a step back and look at what we're getting into? It's just changed the way our psyche and the way we look at things totally different.
There's been a larger focus on things like crew unity, accountability. One of the things that I think happened there was a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of guys coming from off duty. It was right about shift change for those guys, and a lot of guys that were going off duty grabbed their stuff and went. And then there was a huge problem figuring out who was where and what was what. And it kind of made us think a little bit more about making sure that we know where we are, where he is, so that we're all kind of working on the same page. And if something happens and we have to do an operational retreat, or we got to get out right now, we know all three of us are together, bang, we're going out. We went in together, we'll come out together.
Here at City Hall, there wasn't a lot of new policy and procedure in terms of safety. We don't have a metal detector here. We didn't build new barricades, anything like that. It's more of the way we think and what we're prepared for. Our emergency personnel have engaged in some training and tabletop exercises. They're in regular contact with emergency operations locally, regionally, statewide, federally, so that we're in contact and we know what's happening in the event that something goes on.
The emergency response system has not changed dramatically since 9/11. I think there is a better communication and information flow now. I receive emails many a day telling me what's going on throughout the state. There's reports from the state down to every local jurisdiction. So everyone has full information. I think that's probably the biggest change and the best change, you know, because communication, of course, is always the difficult issue. So now we are definitely well informed. There's been additional trainings. There's been funding that's been released for the fire department and law enforcement so they can get special equipment, additional equipment that's more specialized towards terrorism or biochemical, and hopefully there'll be more funds coming down in the future with the Homeland Security.
One of the functions that the federal government has been able to furnish in fairly short order after September 11th was the funneling of information to agencies like ours all over the country out of the newly founded Office of Homeland Security. And so that's been helpful to us in allowing us to assess the level of risk that our facilities might experience and to respond accordingly with appropriate measures and countermeasures. Another thing that the federal government has done to help us maintain the security of our site and our facilities is they awarded us a grant for a little over $100,000 to conduct a vulnerability assessment so that we can re-examine everything that we do in all of our facilities in the new light of the threats that are present in the world today after September 11th.
I think we want people to feel safe. That's why we're here. You know, that's why your fire department is here. That's why your law enforcement is here in the community, to give you that safety and also to react in case something does happen. But I think what we also would like for our citizens and the community to do and to understand is that they need to also become more aware of the fact that they shouldn't feel totally safe just because they live in a rural community away from a very, very high-profile area such as LA City and New York City and so on. They need to be aware of the fact, and they need to accept the fact that we are all vulnerable now. We need to be willing to look and to report any suspicious events and to react accordingly.
We've gotten into our culture thinking that the athlete that can bat 350 or can slam dunk sort of took on a hero role, and 9/11 redefined who our true heroes are. Obviously the firefighters, the sheriffs, each and every day put themselves in a position of putting their life on the line for somebody else. And that was seen clearly on September 11th in New York, where all those firefighters and police officers, you know, went into the burning building, went into the World Trade Center to help others. And you see that here in Santa Clarita. I mean, we have the Jake Coregians, Deputy March, people that there's never that simple traffic stop. There's never that simple domestic violence. Every time they go to a call, there's a potential of a danger to themselves or others. And it redefined and sort of put us back in focus who the true heroes were. And so I think that aspect has been positive for everyone in the country, where we've sort of gotten away from the, you know, $20 million baseball pitcher as a hero back to who the true heroes are in our society.
We don't look at our job any different. It's just, you know, we're here when the public calls and picks up 911, as Simon says, we try to respond in the fast, safest way as possible and get the work done as fast as we can.
I think right after the incident happened, I mean, the people out here were incredible because we had such an outpouring of more at our flagpole of flowers and so forth, and people were bringing by food and telling us how much they love us. And I think what it did was it made people realize that, you know, they don't take us for granted, that we are very vulnerable in what we did. Because let's face it, those guys died. They were running into the building. They weren't trying to get out. They weren't even part of the initial attack or the incident. So they gave up everything. They knew when they were going to work that day that that's a possibility. And I think that made people think about it.
I think that was a wake-up call for people. They suddenly realized, hey, you know, these guys are out there doing it every day. But the bottom line, too, is while we've kind of garnered the lion's share of the attention and the people have focused on law enforcement and fire, there were thousands of people there doing things just because they were there. Civilians, postal workers, garbage collectors, janitors, they were all doing the same things that we were doing, but they don't get the same amount of attention because they're just common everyday folk. And there were a lot of people, the Port Authority police and, you know, people that just worked in the towers themselves that were doing their best to try and help those people. I'm not saying that we, you know, didn't do it, but I'm saying there was a lot of people that contributed to getting thousands of people out of those buildings in time before they did collapse. You know, that doesn't get talked about often enough, I don't think.
We had 3 deputies who were immediately called up. 2 of them are still working here. The 3rd one is still on active duty, and while he's been on active duty, was actually transferred to another unit in the Sheriff's Department. But Mike Chinnery and Artie Thompson were called up to active duty almost immediately, and were assigned to security at LAX. So we lost them for a long time. So they were performing a valuable function for the country by providing security at LAX.
As California Air Guard members, we were assigned to the LAX airport to provide a highly trained, visible, armed military presence for the traveling public to ensure their security while they're traveling, to get basically the traveling public back in the planes and back flying again.
It was very rewarding to have people come up to you and say, hey, you know what, I really feel good about flying because you are here.
I'd say that during the course of a shift, I'd have half a dozen or a dozen people come up to me and thank me for being there. A lot of traveling public would come up and actually want their picture taken with us. It was kind of nice when families would come up and stand next to us, and now we're in these photographs, their vacation albums, their trips that they took abroad.
The Santa Clarita community has a tremendous opportunity because of 9/11 and now this remembrance of it, to ask ourselves, what can we do to further, I think, the things that this community are really about. Family, and I just don't mean families with children, but the family of the community. We have a lot of needs yet here in this community, and it would be great if there were ways that nonprofit organizations, faith communities, and as well as, you know, our city council and other groups could come together and really put the efforts into how do we keep bettering our community. The other challenge, obviously, is how we treat each other. I hope we lay off the horn at intersections. I hope we will give somebody the cut in line when they need it. I hope we will do those small gestures that really say, you know, we do care and we do respect who we are. I think Santa Clarita is great in that capacity and can even do more.
I think people should reflect, get together, offer prayers, sympathies to the departed souls, their families. We sympathize, we have a solidarity with all the people who suffered. And remember the people who died in the incident, and try and pray for them and ask for the forgiveness of people who were involved, and, you know, generally pray for the departed souls.
We're going to be restricted. We're probably never again going to be able to do all the great things we've always enjoyed. We're going to have to go through more security checks in public places. We're going to have to do more security checks at airports, where we're not going to have the same access to the Pentagons and the White Houses. But the one thing we can do is, when we have that 2 hours, we can make a decision. Do we spend it with our son, with our daughters, taking them somewhere positive? Can we spend time with them doing homework? Or are we going to go off with some buddies and, you know, go to a bar while the kids are home with, you know, mom? Those are decisions as a result of 9/11 we can make. because the people that were in those planes, the people that were in World Trade Center, they would love to have one more minute with their loved ones. And so hopefully that's what we can take out of this past year.